A great redemption arc can be the defining part of an already fantastic show. It's a story almost everyone's familiar with. Yet somehow, a fully explored redemption arc is less common than you'd think. But the root of any good story is conflict, and there's very few circumstances where you get better conflict than a character trying to redeem oneself. So today we're going to look at a couple fantastic characters and break down the art of a redemption arc into 6 independent phases. Then we're going to look at a couple more examples, and finally explore why redemption is such an appealing story when done right. Welcome to this week's video. My name is Pei, and today we're exploring some of the best redemption arcs in storytelling. My Hero Academia, and especially Avatar: The Last Airbender, are both stories that at one point were kind of dominant in my day-to-day viewing. I hold very dearly the early stages of My Hero Academia, and like many others, eventually kind of just fell off. I plan on making a video down the line exploring why that's so common and how the recent seasons kind of functioned as a revival, but today I want to focus on 2 specific fire-bearing characters: Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender and Endeavor from My Hero Academia. These are 2 of multiple characters that are personal favorite examples of redemption arcs. Zuko is arguably the most iconic redemption arc in animation, maybe even ever, but I find Endeavor's redemption arc fascinating because it's one I never expected to work as well as it did for me. Despite all the peaks in the first couple seasons of My Hero Academia, a scene surrounding a character I kind of wrote off really stands out as one of my favorites. So what makes these characters' arcs work so well? Well, it starts with the first phase. For a character to redeem themselves, you start by making them bad. Zuko's story begins as a banished prince, forbidden from returning home until he finds the Avatar. Given the stories about Aang, the Avatar, it's no shock that Zuko's gonna function as an antagonist. But it's not just that he works against Aang, it's also his personality. He's brash and demanding, entitled and aggressive, a character that's easy not to root for. He's the prince of a nation that's attacking the world and actively working against the force meant to bring peace. Endeavor's initial introduction in My Hero Academia reduces him to just a terrible father. He is an external force and pressure, an abusive parent to a character the audience loves. There's a complete disregard for his family, a cruelty in the way he acts. Even the nature of his role as a father is built from shambles. A marriage that in the most forgiving portrayal is purely functional, but from a more realistic standpoint is abusive. These characters are introduced as bad, for good reason. Stories require conflict, and often individuals represent that. And there is this interesting question of at what point writing these characters did they decide to redeem them? With Zuko, it was likely early on, maybe even before production began. But I think with Endeavor, it was a late pivot, which is part of why I find his redemption arc so fascinating and flawed. Because while I like Endeavor's arc in the first couple seasons, I know a lot of people have voiced issue with it. Because while you need to make characters bad, the worse they are, the harder it is to have a satisfying and engaging redemption arc. The second phase of a redemption arc is to showcase a character's philosophy. This one's really important. An important component of any good character writing is considering motive. Why do they do what they do? I find this especially true of a couple archetypes: antagonist, villains, likable bastards. To have a good reason why a character is acting as an obstacle or directly in opposition to the protagonist can do a lot to enhance the conflict. I'm a sucker for complex characters, and that absolutely extends to antagonists. Zuko's philosophy is simple: a teenager obsessed with regaining his honor. The scar on his face is a constant reminder of how his father, and therefore his nation, feels about him. And his one chance at redemption is to prove himself by capturing the Avatar, the biggest direct threat against that nation. Zuko's philosophy is one that makes complete sense given his circumstance. And as the writers explore Zuko's story throughout the first 2 seasons of Avatar, we see them engage constantly with that. Zuko's obviously got a lot of personality traits that make it easy to kind of dislike him, especially in the beginning of the story, but there's also no shortage of humanizing his plight and struggle. Endeavor is a character that above everything prioritizes strength as a hero. It's the foundation of the way he lives his life, and therefore the way he treated his partner and family. In the beginning of My Hero Academia, he actually kind of feels like a cardboard cutout. Conflict for an important character to overcome. But interestingly enough, later, the way they showcase Endeavor's philosophy is a major component of what makes his redemption arc so interesting to me. Because despite all the harm he's caused, he doesn't for a second shy away from the responsibilities that come with being a hero, and the risks and sacrifice that come with that. Bad characters tend to serve a direct function. By showcasing a bad character's philosophy, it doesn't make them good, but it opens a line to empathize with them. It plants a seed that eventually, with the right environment, can grow into something much bigger, like a beloved character. Zuko's anger and temperament, the same traits that make it easy to dislike him, also run in complete conjunction with the struggle he's facing, the isolation from everything he grew up in, and the role he never quite fit into. Zuko's singular obsessive pursuit is a matter of self-preservation, acceptance, and identity. To be banished from the Fire Nation is to not have a place in the world, to give up almost everything and everyone he knows. This is where Endeavor's story falters in comparison. I think the consistency he showcases in his philosophy kind of comes too late, and would have been more effective if the dimensions to it were introduced earlier. That the goal to create or be the number one hero is more than just an achievement. It's a complete pursuit. The third phase is to escalate to a breaking point, where a character's philosophy, the very foundation of what allowed them to be quote-unquote bad, is shattered. This is a really important step. This functions as a catalyst for the rest of the character's arc. Endeavor's breaking point comes with what some people might see as a reward. He above everything has strived to become the number one hero, a pursuit of power by seemingly any means. But in finally becoming the number one hero, he's stripped of that opportunity to earn it. In Season 3, All Might sacrifices the last remnants of his power in a grand finale against the big bad in the series, All for One. The scene is not only amazing, but it showcases to Endeavor just how big the gap was that he was chasing. And when he finally starts to fill those shoes as the new number one hero, because All Might has used his last bits of strength, he realizes that the shoes are bigger to fill than he even realized. Public perception and being the symbol of peace. It's all out of reach. This is when the character starts to really evolve into something more than just a cardboard cutout antagonist. There's this fantastic scene where he talks to All Might, and in an uncharacteristically introspective moment, asks what it means to be a symbol of peace. What does All Might have that Endeavor never found? By getting what he wanted, to be the number one hero, and realizing how empty it is, that ultimately it's a tool for a goal, not a goal in itself, it shatters that philosophy. Because the compromises he made in this pursuit undermined his ability to fit that position in the way he needs to. It's the start of a major transformation, and for me as a viewer, it was the moment I realized that the writing was going to do more with this character than indicated. If there isn't a believable and well-written breaking point, it can kind of sabotage the rest of the arc. It's also not enough on its own. There are these things I call like half redemption arcs, where they have the sudden drastic change at the end of a story for a character without the entire process of what it would take for them to get to that change. I think Darth Vader is a good example of this, because a good breaking point that shatters a character's philosophy can absolutely force them to change, but the actual changing process is very important. The struggles and slow introspection that comes with the shattering of an ironclad philosophy. Zuko's story actually has multiple breaking points. The first being when he's deemed an outlaw at the beginning of the second season, not only banished but now an active fugitive in the eyes of the Fire Nation, a punishment for the way he pursued his goal, and very importantly, the decision to leave Iroh. The fourth phase is one of the most important and difficult to pull off. I call it lost but present. Change sometimes can be the result of an epiphany, a breaking point, but it very rarely happens suddenly. The stronger a character's philosophy, the harder it is for them to adjust to it being destroyed. Zuko's arc, where he navigates the Earth Nation alone, takes a step away from Iroh and really considers what he wants, is an incredibly important phase in his overarching development. I love that the writers in Avatar showcase the complexity of the world. Not all Earthbenders are presented as heroes, and not all Firebenders are villains. And this complexity is incredibly important for Zuko coming to terms with the circumstance he finds himself in. He's searching for answers and struggling to find them. His ideals before gave him confidence and direction, but without them, what comes next? Who is he and what is he doing with his life? Endeavor, in being given his ultimate goal, feeling like he didn't earn it, finds it to be surprisingly empty, especially given everything he dedicated to achieving it. He still feels inadequate, because while he has the title, he can't seem to live up to it. He spent his entire career stuck in the shadow of All Might, but now he's facing something even worse, All Might's legacy. And he's realizing that the sacrifices that he forced himself and his family to make are far from worth it. The end of this phase and the beginning of the next are where we get that great line from Endeavor asking not for forgiveness, but to have the opportunity to atone. Something that makes this phase really difficult is unless it's really well written, it's generally boring. Pulling the primary motive away from a character is incredibly hard to navigate as a writer. However, if this and the next phase are rushed through, the entire redemption arc feels hollow. Both Endeavor and Zuko's stories begin with anger and ambition, an absolute pursuit of power and assuredness, obsessing over a singular goal. To strip them of those is to remove what seems to be their entire character. But in reality, I don't think that's the case. I think Endeavor's character becomes more interesting when he loses that singular goal. And I think that's almost undeniable with Zuko. The reason I call this lost but present is because sometimes writers want change to happen off screen, but I feel like very rarely does it actually work. Maybe that's because I love some well-written internal conflict. But this phase is crucial in allowing the audience not only to build, but actively engage with empathizing with these characters. It's the final step of the metamorphosis phase of the redemption arc, where a character transforms from what we knew them to be to something entirely new, and the audience discovers this new arc alongside them. So with the destruction of one foundation comes establishing a new one. The fifth phase of a redemption arc is better, but not too quickly. Zuko's redemption arc is fascinating because it actually initially is kind of a red herring. At the end of the second season, Zuko's given an opportunity for salvation, but he's also given a chance to return home. That singular goal that he thought was out of reach suddenly is right in front of him, forced to choose between supporting Iroh or Azula, and he seems to throw away all of that time he dedicated in the second season towards discovery, unable to refuse the dream finally presented right in front of him, to return home a hero, to be accepted by his family and nation, to regain his honor. The fact that Zuko makes that mistake is a major component of what makes his story work as well as it does, because the worst thing you can do in a redemption arc is rush it. Slowly across My Hero Academia, you can see the writing for Endeavor come together, but a lot of people had issue with his arc, arguing that there are certain lines that you can't come back from. And while maybe that's true, I think the real issue with Endeavor's arc was the pacing. Part of the reason I'm so forgiving for the way Endeavor was written is because from the start, I had very low expectations for his character. Like every trash isekai that makes any obstacle laughably evil, so you don't feel bad when the protagonist eventually kills them. Endeavor's character was initially so archetypically toxic father. In some ways, it felt like you could replace him with a stern cardboard cutout and get the same result. That's why I really liked when the story figured out that he can be a complex character. I think I'm a little biased in this situation because I grew up in an environment with an emotionally abusive father who, after a divorce, kind of had his philosophy shattered and worked very hard to engage in a healthy way with me. It took years and complicated times, but I'm really grateful that I have the relationship I do with him, that the thing that was really bad didn't stay that way forever. Endeavor's story does eventually do good, but not too fast. The issue is that the order of the phases is a little out of whack. Because actually the thing that kicks off his entire redemption arc is being played as a hero, kind of at the start of him being lost but present and well before good but not too fast. Endeavor is presented with a terrifying challenge, a monster that's overwhelmingly strong called Anomu, where he showcases his philosophy that being the number one hero comes with responsibilities, putting your body and life on the line. When a character, despite their wrongdoings, really lives by their philosophy, it's fascinating. For some reason, when people put their money where their mouth is and don't live hypocritically, it can completely transform the way the audience sees a character. Endeavor's fight against the Nomu at the end of Season 4 is a fantastic scene, his salvation. The problem, though, being that a lot of the audience was hit with pretty intense tonal whiplash. It's hard to sit with a character who's been presented as irredeemable being the hero, which was a shame because for me the scene was fantastic. It was just a hard change to make so suddenly. If Endeavor's character had been given more introspection, the opportunity to get better but not too quickly, I think his first moment of salvation would be peak. Instead, it's just a scene I personally love. The fact that we're given a red herring in Zuko's first redemption, that he returns home and gets everything he could ever want, only, like Endeavor, to find it empty, is really fascinating for his arc of getting better, because he kind of goes through all the steps again. An action that makes him bad, the betrayal of Iroh, a showcasing of his philosophy in his return home, a breaking point where he decides to leave, him being lost but present as he figures out what to do next, literally having to stop Combustion Man, the assassin he hired to find Aang. getting better but not too quickly in his awkward but heartfelt conversation with a frog in the swamp, before eventually taking a leap of faith and approaching the gang, trying to convince them to give him a chance, allowing him to teach Aang firebending. And it's not sunshine and rainbows, there's tons of conflict and hurt feelings because of the previous betrayal, as well as the incredibly complex nature of their relationship as they've been at odds with one another for so long. But Zuko doesn't just get better, he demonstrates growth in the boiling rock and accompanying Katara, being the voice of reason when she's struggling. But there's two major moments that really solidify Zuko's fantastic arc. The first is his soul-tearing apology to Iroh, and the second is when he gets what he actually wants, when he fights Azula, the prodigy that's everything he could never be, in one of the most beautiful scenes in Avatar, then beats her, only to throw it all away to save Katara. This is the sixth phase, salvation, a moment where a character is able to demonstrate all the growth, where they get to be a hero and the audience is fully behind them. Zuko might be the most interesting part of one of my favorite shows of all time. And yes, he's helped in one of my favorite characters in all of fiction in Iroh, but there's a reason his story is so beloved. I think redemption arcs, when done right, are incredibly important. Redemption isn't about refusing to acknowledge what happened in the past, or even to go back to what things were like before. It's about building something new from ruins, to acknowledge because of what happened that things are different, and that they can still be okay. I think it's so important people are given opportunities to get better, because otherwise they just keep doubling down time and time again. But that comes with some degree of change, learning from your past, acknowledging the way your actions have influenced others, growing from mistakes, because while you can't take them back, you can at least learn from them. I think that good redemption arcs showcase just how possible that is, but the best ones really work through that process. Like I said before, I think part of why Endeavor's arc in some communities was so controversial is because he was given an act of salvation so early, before people really had a chance to redefine how they felt about him. Salvation is an incredibly important phase, the cherry on top, but it actually does the opposite without a proper foundation. Redemption in stories is earned, step by step.